Is the Earth flat?
I don't know. Before we get into that, though, dude, so on the way here, I heard on the radio that, do you guys eat bananas?
I do,
a lot?
yeah.
You eat
I
a
do,
lot of bananas?
Yeah. I'd say five a week. I don't use my teeth either.
Yeah, more for the shape, not the taste.
You start from the middle?
That's a good idea. I should start.
Do you make eye contact with anybody?
Yeah, no.
So,
He doesn't chew, just one throat.
well, I heard this stat on the way here that the average American eats like 27 pounds of bananas a year. Do you think you eat 27 pounds?
I don't think so.
I don't know that I've eaten 27 pounds of bananas in my life.
Yeah. I don't eat a lot of, I like them, but I don't really eat them.
Yeah.
Is this a new conspiracy theory?
No.
Is this no?
This is factual.
Yeah.
Is this from InfoWars?
No.
It's just DuckDuckGo. Where did we get this information?
No, I just heard it on the way here. Yeah, 27 pounds. So that means since I eat like no pounds a year, somebody else is eating
Double.
That's what it is.
50 something. I
So
can't do 27 times
somebody
two.
has to eat more
Yeah.
to compensate for your lack of eating bananas. What are you doing?
Yeah.
You're making extra work for people.
Put out, man.
Yeah.
I know. Eat your bananas.
Yeah.
Do your part.
Do your part to stop the spread.
Yeah, no, that had nothing to do with anything. And I literally, as you started talking, I remember hearing that on the way here, and I was like, that was interesting.
That's the most interesting thing you heard, huh?
On the way here.
27 pounds of bananas.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah, most interesting thing today. But no, so flat Earth. So we talked about that a little bit, and I really don't know. One of the things I was thinking about the other day, though, along the flat Earth thing, is everything that everybody knows of the Earth is globe, round, this sphere, and you see these photos, and it's a perfect circle. And I heard Neil deGrasse a couple times in different podcasts saying that, like, it's an oblate shape. It's actually like pear-shaped. And he was like, because it's spinning, so it's going to get wider around the edges, and that the poles shift in time, so then it becomes like kind of a pear-shaped oblate type. And then I'm thinking, all right, so like, why would you even call that a globe? And he's highly regarded in the mainstream as being, and whether you want to believe that he's truthful or not, if he's compromised or not, or some type of operative or disinformation, you could take that as far as you want. But if we're going to go with a mainstream voice on this, he says it's pear-shaped. So
What does Bill Nye the Science Guy say?
Bill Nye would probably just show you, he'd probably pick up an actual globe off his desk and say, this is what it is. But it's weird that every single picture we've ever been sold, and NASA doesn't actually make an argument against the fact that what they produce is their composites, like they're assembled images, like they're not actual photos of the Earth, but that's really strange.
When you're looking out, when you're seeing, looking out the International Space Station or Hubble telescope or the Webb telescope now, the one argument that I always hear is like, well, there's no stars in the background. It's always black.
Yeah.
Like if that was a real photo, you would see other things in the background.
Yeah.
Is that kind of...
Well, so, yeah, well, I mean, along those lines, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the press conference that the astronauts did when they came back from the Apollo mission from the moon, and you have Neil Armstrong, and they're sitting on this panel, all three of them, and that's really interesting to watch too. It won't prove anything to you, but they all look really nervous. They look like uncomfortable. They look almost sad to be there. And they contradict each other while they're up there, and one was saying how bright the stars were during their travel. And then another one's like, I didn't see any stars when we were out there. And that's if the three of us were in a ship going to the moon, don't you think we'd all be like, dude, do you see all those stars?
There's not a lot to see. So
Yeah.
is
If you're looking out a window this big at space and you're
Yeah.
deeper in space than anyone's ever been, wouldn't the three of us be like, dude, you see these stars? Or, hey, that's weird.
I
No
really
stars.
thought I would see some stars.
But I feel like we'd kind of be on the same page with that,
Yeah.
you know? So, but that press conference is really interesting to watch because they look so uncomfortable, you know, like almost sad. Like they look like they don't want to be there saying what they're saying. So, yeah, that's odd to me.
So what do you, I guess, so I've heard several different arguments. I think we all have about, oh, Earth is flat, Earth is round. Like, what do you think, I guess, what would be the idea of, okay, let's make everybody think the Earth is round? What's the point of that? What is gained from that as opposed to, well, who cares? The Earth is flat. Like it just, at some point there had to be some sort of, one way or the other, right? There had to be some sort of,
Yeah, if it's being covered up at some point, they had to,
something.
a group of guys in a dark room had to decide.
Right. Hey, let's tell everybody this
Yeah.
is a basketball,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like what?
So, probably one of the main theories on that is that if they convince you that the Earth is a ball, that it's round, there's nowhere else to go. You know, if you travel in any direction, you're just going to keep circling. You're going to keep going around. You keep seeing the same things. Whereas if it's flat, that the land masses that we know of could just be a portion of that flat mass. So there could be an unknown amount of continents outside of what we know or where we're allowed to go. So that's one of them. I think also, if you think about, you know, if you think about making us a globe and making space, then you have infinite amount of galaxies, planets, moons, stars, you know, billions, trillions, whatever it is, that makes us, and then you come up with a theory of Big Bang, which is just a theory that basically preaches that something can come from nothing and that eventually life can come from non-life, which doesn't happen anywhere scientifically, then we were an accident. You know, we came from nothing. It was just this weird accident that evolved into all of this. But if you believe that we're on a flat plane, whether it's flat Earth, whether there's a dome over it, whether there's an ice wall, whether it's any of the theories that are out there, that I think that speaks much harder to intelligent design. I think that speaks much harder to the fact that we are important. We are the center of it all. We are in the middle of it all. We're not just a mistake among an infinity of space. We are it. You know, and the people who really believe in it, especially the ones who, if you believe that there's a dome, they believe in that the scriptures that talk about God created the heavens and the earth. He created the firmament. He separated the waters from above from the waters below. That's one of the beliefs, is that above that firmament is water. That when God flooded the earth, and it talks about that he opened the sky and let water down, that's what was happening, that he was splitting that firmament and letting water up from the bottom too, from the seas. But I think that's one of the most compelling theories, is that of the purpose as to why they would do it, is it makes us kind of an accident and unimportant if we're in infinity. But if we're the center of it all, that makes us all really important. Makes what we're doing here, makes our lives really important and significant.
I think one of the craziest parts of the flat Earth, and it's the most interesting, is this ice wall that surrounds this flat Earth, and what has been reported by some people is on the other side of that ice wall. Do you have any experience with reading any of that stuff?
Well, there's definitely an ice wall. You know, there's definitely an ice wall. Whether or not that ice wall is holding in all of our oceans, and whether or not there's a dome into that ice wall, whether or not that's an impenetrable thing that's keeping us all within the continents that we know, the seas that we know, I have no idea. But yeah, there's definitely an ice wall, and there's videos you can watch of that. You know, I know that when Admiral Byrd, you know, did his missions, he had talked about going beyond what was noted as the documented South Pole and finding more land the size of America with minerals, with resources, with oases. He mentioned having land that was not covered in snow, green, you know. So if there's an ice wall, you know, like, yeah. I mean, there is an ice wall, but whether or not that's the absolute border, I don't know. There's actually another really interesting theory on that, though, because if the ice wall is Antarctica, and under flat Earth theory, if Antarctica is basically a big circle that goes around the continents that we know, there's theories that there are holes, there's gaps that you can get through and actually get through to other continents. And this is a weird one. You might have to dig a little bit to find this one if you do your own research on this. But there's also, so these people have done this stuff where, you know, the moon, if you take a picture of the moon, you know, everybody's seen like the face on the moon or whatever, but we see like, you know, it's craters or it's whatever. But from where we are, we basically see contrast, dark parts, light parts, things like that. But if you take a map of, if you take the flat Earth map that they say is the flat Earth map, the Gleason map, and you reverse it, the moon, the lower quarter of the moon is actually a negative of that. And there's people who have taken, and this sounds crazy, but if you take that image and you put it against the lower right portion of the moon, and you fade in one and fade out the other, it's an exact match. It's exact. But that only accommodates for like the bottom right third of the moon. So there's a bunch of other lands up to the top left. So what some people are theorizing, especially if we haven't been to the moon, we haven't been to space, is that the moon is some type of almost like a negative image of the world that we actually live on.
So like a reflection, like because we're in the dome.
Yeah, either a current reflection of where we're actually at, or some type of negative image that was like branded into it or something. But if you, I'm telling you, like, it's crazy. Like, and this is one of the ones. So
Well,
like,
it doesn't sound crazy at all. It doesn't sound crazy.
it sounds totally normal. Yeah. Well, all this stuff's interesting to me too. Like, you know, like if you look at conspiracy theories in general, and how they started, why they started, you know, we're not spoon-fed the truth about anything. You know, like the wars we get in, the things that happen in the weather, nature, science, history, you know, like I'm not really in the belief that like you just pick up a book and read about it and now you know about it. Like, you really got to research it from all angles. You got to stay open-minded. You have to read what the opposing viewpoints are too. Like, how do you know where you land if you don't know the argument on both sides? And so I think just trusting what we've been spoon-fed by people who don't love us, who are looking to control us, is really ignorant and really dumb. And that doesn't mean that every theory that you read is right. A lot of them are just complete garbage, you know, in my opinion. But I think you have to at least digest them, you know, and then just figure out where you land on it. But
yeah, it seems that conspiracy theories come from humans. We're always seeking the truth. We want to know what's going on. And so the people that have a monopoly on some of the things that happen in this country, let's say, when they withhold that truth from us, we distrust them. And then we are looking for alternative ways to because we feel like they're lying. So that's where these conspiracy theories come, at least the modern day conspiracy theories. It's like anything that doesn't go along with the current media narrative is a conspiracy theory. Well, it's because we don't really trust you. Yeah. You don't really trust what you're telling us. So we're going to look for other reasons and other avenues in which we may find the truth. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just in our human nature to do that because we don't trust the authority. It's, you know, we're going to try to find some way around to find the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And they've earned that distrust.
Oh,
you
for
know,
sure.
so it's like, if you want us to trust you, tell us the truth, show some consistency, you know, and we'll give you some leeway and we'll trust, you know. But when you lie, cheat, and steal, like, why would we believe anything you're telling me? In fact, for me personally, it's to the point where any mainstream narrative on anything that comes out, I just assume it's wrong.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too.
I just assume it's BS and I'm being lied to, and there's propaganda behind it. Like, you know, there's an agenda behind it that wants me to believe and think and act and feel a certain way, rather than being free thinking, you know. And I think one of the places we saw this was with, you know, when they started doing the vaccines, and, you know, they were like, well, trust the experts, and, you know, trust the science, trust the experts. But, you know, who are the experts? You know, like, what, Bill Gates, a computer guy, he's now a vaccine expert. And so we're supposed to trust him when he's been very open and clear that depopulation is important to him. You know, when he's buying up tons of farmland, he's doing that appeal stuff where they're coating fruit with these toxic chemicals. And, you know, so when a bunch of stuff starts happening like that, it's like, why would I trust the experts? And then you're going to criticize me and make me sound like an idiot for wanting to do my own research. You know, like I saw this comedian, he was talking about that type of thing. And it was like, you know, if I'm going to go buy a car, you know, it's like, tell all my buddies, hey, I'm going to go buy this car. I'm really excited. I'm going to go buy a car. And everybody telling me, well, don't do your research. You know, don't do your research on buying the car. Just go talk to the salesman. You know, he's the expert. Trust the expert. And that's what it is. We're trusting the salesman, you know, and they have much deeper things involved. So yeah, I don't trust any of that. And the whole conspiracy theory stuff in general, what's weird to me is you can be a theorist on anything. You can be a physics theorist. You can be a theorist on even like movie theory, you know, what they actually meant about it and where it should have gone and what this meant, if there's hidden meanings there, and any type of science theory, theory on history, philosophy. You can be any type of theorist in the world. But if you question what the powers that be are doing, now that type of theory, that's somehow bad. You know, like, you're crazy for questioning these liars, cheaters, and stealers. You're the crazy one for questioning them. That's insane to me. You know, and I know that. So like the term conspiracy theory wasn't even a negative thing until around JFK.
I think it was CIA, right? Who even coined that term.
Well, so that's what some people say. That is.
That's a conspiracy.
That's a conspiracy. Welcome to conspiracy theory.
Oh my God, my mind's blown.
You're a conspiracy theorist.
Oh my God.
So that's what some people say. Some people say that it was not that. I don't know that they necessarily had a conspiracy theory agenda to create a conspiracy theory. But what I do think happened was, so the term conspiracy theory had been used like back in even in the 1800s, but it was the elites, it was the powers that be that used that term with the public to talk about foreign influence, to talk about things happening in the world, and to kind of unite them and get them on the side of wherever that country stood. It didn't become a negative thing. It didn't become the type of negative thing where you were. It was like you were looked at negatively until the JFK assassination, and then they had the Warren Commission, and within the Warren Commission, they said that they had said that they needed to. I forget the exact terminology, but it was something along the lines of, we need to stem the conspiracy theories that are posing a negative light, because people didn't buy it. With JFK, like, you know, if you read about it now in a modern history book, and I remember even when I was in high school, you kind of read the narrative and you figure that, well, that's what it is. But history is told by the victors, you know, but people didn't buy it. They didn't believe it back then. A lot of people didn't. They didn't believe that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. They didn't believe that there wasn't government involvement and that it wasn't a hit, an internal hit. And so that's where that came up. And so then when people would ask questions and say things, that's when they started just, And the media, we see the media do this all day, every day right now. Just the tone you use it in, the way that you say that verbiage, you can really give a real strong connotation to it.
Well, it was so, I mean, looking back, it's so great to have hindsight now, because looking back on COVID, it was so strong and blatant, right? The government was trying to suppress information like we talked about. This is where conspiracy theories come from, is that the public distrusts the people who are supposed to be telling them the truth. And so time after time, people who wanted to at least get information about whether the vaccine was safe or whether the virus was even dangerous or where it even came from, it was silenced over and over and over. And now we know that the government colluded with the social media companies to silence. I mean, it's widespread and it's clear that the government colluded to do this. So, I mean, not only has it ramped up in almost the last 80 years, but I mean, it's almost right in front of our face now. It's like they don't even care. We're going to do this. We're going to suppress and silence people. And then we're going to call them conspiracy theorists when even after they've already proven that the government was silencing us and they were wrong, right? Yeah. So it is an interesting time that we live in. They're blatant about it. I think back in the 60s with JFK, it was I don't think the news reached, there was not as many voices, right?
Oh, yeah,
there wasn't as much noise. So it was a little bit harder. They could control the narrative. And I think the government and the media like that is very controlling. I mean, John Kerry just came out this week and talked about how the First Amendment's a roadblock because it's challenging for him to make laws or whatever he does on a regular basis nowadays. It's challenging for him because there's not consensus around an idea. And to people who have been in the government for 40 or 50 years like he has, that is a real problem for him. The crazy thing is he doesn't see it from our view anymore. Like, we're the people. We want the information. We want more information out. We want to understand what's really going on. And if we're only hearing our information from one source, which is the government and the media, who is basically a spokesman for the government, we don't trust you.
Yeah.
And so what we need is more information so that we as the people can finally come to a consensus. And when you lie to us and we know about it, that's the problem.
Yeah.
And so this whole thing gets spun out of control, and the government officials like John Kerry are sitting there saying, the First Amendment's really a problem. That's when you know.
Of course it is.
That's when
For
you know
it's a real problem.
They are way out of touch. Either they're way out of touch, which I do believe you can get in the government for so long and just have your own sole, singular focus that you're just out of touch with how it's like to live as an everyday American. And there's some that are just, they're after no good for sure. They're after their own agenda. So
I think there's probably a pretty good reason why it was the First Amendment.
Oh,
right? It could have been the 23rd Amendment. It could have been anything, but that first and foremost, the right of the people to have free speech.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's probably the most important. And then obviously the Second Amendment being, hey, this is what protects the First Amendment. But like, to make a statement like that is like,
yeah.
Really?
I mean, it's so important, and I mean, the downfall that we've seen of any totalitarian civilization, free speech has always been a part of that restriction. That's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that they needed to do that. People love diversity here until it becomes diversity of thought, diversity of opinions. That's the checks and balance. That's the social checks and balance. That's the social checks and balance between us and our government. We absolutely have to have that, and once you shut that up, the discourse stops, and now you can be fed those narratives and force-fed those narratives from an entity that has proven they can't be trusted. And that's nothing new. Like, it's the oldest joke of all time, that how many politician jokes have you heard since birth? Like, politicians can't be trusted. They're snakes. We can't trust them. But what amazes me is that expectation, and that people still do. They got a long track record of not being able to, but they still do. And I see it. I was thinking about this the other day. I see it as like just a straightforward abusive relationship. It's like a husband who lies to his wife and kids and beats them all up and just uses them for his own gain, for his own purposes, completely takes advantage of them and drives them into the gutter. And then he's pissed because they don't trust him, and because they don't buy the next thing that comes out of his mouth. You know, like that level of trust that they're asking us for has to be earned. And I haven't seen them do anything. And that's, you know, people can think what they will about Trump, but I see why people grew to trust Trump, because he actually did the things, or at least tried in every case, to do the things he ran on. When was the last time we saw that happen? You know, and people can agree with those things or not, like those things or not, like him or not. But I don't know of a politician in my lifetime that ran on certain things and actually did them. You know, and I think that, and people want to call it a cult following or whatever, and there may be some of that. There's definitely a lot of that probably on both sides. But he earned trust because he kept his word and he did the things he said that he would do. And I think that's what we would need to see, like on a global scale, or at least a country scale, is show us some consistency, that you actually give a crap about us and tell us the truth for a while. You know, and yeah, we'll be more likely to buy what you're selling us next time. There's a path to that, but of course we'll never see that.
Well, some of these things, for instance, let's say 9/11, right? A lot of conspiracies around that. That is such a huge operation. If you're the government and you're going to go, okay, we're going to do this, that's such a huge operation to undertake. You're bound to make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
You can't think of everything. Okay, they're going to ask questions about this. Or what? Okay, what about this? What about the temperature that jet fuel burns? Opposed to like, hey man, after the fact, who cares? 20 years from now. So the time we're living in now, they don't care. They pulled it off. They got everybody to think that, hey man, this is legit. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But like any of these type of Kennedy, any of these things, right?
Yeah.
There's enough questions that just don't add up that we sit here. I mean, at least if you're a person that's going, I kind of want the truth on this. I don't really care what the media is feeding me. I want to know the facts. There's always enough questions that it's like, I don't know, man. And then they go, oh, you don't trust us? No. Like, there are a couple loose ends here that you forgot to tie up.
Yeah, well, and a lot of those questions too are really obvious ones. And when you see your own government, your own media getting stonewalled from getting those answers, that's just weird.
Yeah.
Like if it is exactly what you're telling us, why not just be blatantly transparent about that? Just prove it to us. It shouldn't be hard to prove it to us.
Just release all the documents. Don't say you're going to release the documents and then redact half of them.
Yeah, give it all.
Give us, because that's what's keeping us. When you redact a certain amount of documents, it obviously in some kind of event that you have, there's going to be paperwork and documentation, and some of it's just going to be standard paperwork, and then there's going to be the real information that matters. Right. And whether it's true or not, we think that you're hiding stuff from us because day after day we kept getting lied to. So if this big event happens and we don't trust you because you say that you're going to release all the documents, yet you redacted, 25 or 30 or 50 pages of them, of course we're going to think those are what's the real meat of it, especially when what you release is meaningless.
What is so top secret right now about the Kennedy assassination that happened in 1963?
Yeah.
What is so top secret that the rest of America can't handle?
Everybody's
dead.
Yeah.
I think everything has a little bit of a shelf life, right? If you're trying to do some sort of operation, right? There was missions you guys were a part of that they top secret. Nobody gets to know about this. 30 years later, it's like, oh yeah, man, we were here. Guys are writing books about it. Like at a certain point, it happened. Nothing changes the fact that it happened. Release the info. All the people that were involved are probably dead. Yeah. Like release the info. Like what's the deal?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the question, right? Like who's it implicating and who's it put at risk? And it's in my opinion, it's likely nothing more than the fact that our own government would kill its own president.
The funny part about that is I think if you did a poll, at least 50% of the population would not put that past our own government. It's, if you said, hey,
but then it would be confirmed, so now what do? Now you have to go dismantle all the 3-letter agencies, because they haven't gotten better since then. Like they're not, like they haven't gotten, they're not more moral today than they were then. They got better resources now than they've ever had.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about 9/11, and things that were hidden and stuff like that. And it's like, who was in the best position to pull that off? Was it a bunch of cave dwellers with box cutters, or was it us? Was it our own agencies, the most powerful intelligence in the world, with all the resources you could ever want? And I don't know. I get into a whole thing on that, but I think that's the real question, and it's just amazing to me that being a theorist on anything, like if you were to, let's say you go to a party with your wife, right, and you're at some cocktail party and you're socializing and meeting people, and you shake someone's hand and like, oh, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a theorist. Oh, that's cool. They'd immediately think, oh, that must be something important. Like theory is good. And it could be on any topic, and they'd probably find it interesting that you did that. Not if it's questioning the government.
Not if the first word is conspiracy.
And like conspiracies aren't happening all the time everywhere. You know, how many attempts have there been made on Trump in the last few months? Those are conspiracies. Like, those things are happening. People are conspiring. People are conspiring all the time. Don't you dare think about it, though. Don't you look into it. Don't question it. Yeah, just, CNN's gotcha. Like they'll make sure you get what you need, but don't think for yourself on this. Like, that's crazy to me. Like, who approaches any aspect of their life that way? Other than that. And I remember I didn't always think this way either. Like, I wasn't always this open-minded to that. I've always kind of liked weird things and fringe things and things that were beyond the norm. But I remember one time I was working. I was at work, and I was taking an ADD break, and I was messing around on YouTube, and I don't even remember what I was looking at. But then I saw like some conspiracy theory just thumbnail pop up. I don't even remember what it was. It might have been Bigfoot or whatever. I don't know what it was. And part of me wanted to click on it. And then there's another part of me that was like, don't do that, you idiot. And then I was like, it actually bothered me that I had to have that conversation with myself. Like, it bothered me. And I'm like, I'm a grown-ass man. I'm a real boy. Like, if I want to watch this, I'm going to watch it. And if I disagree with it after I'm done watching it, then I disagree with it. And so I remember watching whatever that thing was. Don't remember what it was. And I remember at the end of it, it was like, like, it just got me thinking. It didn't make me a believer of anything, but it opened up areas of thought for me. And then that just snowballed into a whole thing. But it was that first moment of just letting myself entertain the idea that maybe the world's a little different than the box that I grew up in and the box I wanted it to be. And believe me, I don't necessarily want any of these things to be true. I don't know for sure that they are. But in fact, most of them I don't want to be true. I hope they're not. But you got to have your mind open,
Well, in the scientific community, they call that a hypothesis, right?
Yeah.
But when you say it, it's a conspiracy. Yeah. Like, that's literally science trying to
that's
prove
exactly right.
that, hey, can we time travel? I don't know, but they're sure trying to prove that we can or we can't.
I want to stay open to the idea, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Ryan, did you time travel here today?
Maybe a little bit.
Okay.
Just until like 67th, and then I got some subway, and I walked the rest.
Yeah, you can't hit 88 miles an hour from the roads too. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, literally science, right? We have a theory. There's that theory word, and science tries to prove it either right or wrong.
Yeah.
They get grant money based on a idea, a hypothesis. Then you have one. Well, you're not a scientist, Chris. You're not allowed to. Stop thinking about this. Just believe us. Just do what we tell you to do. And it's crazy the amount of control and even like with COVID, right? At first it was just shut all this information down. Horse dewormer, you guys are stupid. Like, it's not like the guy won a Nobel Peace Prize for coming up with that drug, right?
No.
And it works. Don't do that. That's a conspiracy. Well, now, like, well-respected medical journals are writing articles on this stuff, and now it's just like, yeah, whatever, cool.
Yeah.
Because COVID served its purpose, whatever that was, transfer of wealth, whatever, dry run, whatever you want to call it, it served its purpose, and now we're allowed to get the information. And even the people that called you a conspiracy theorist, when you hand them documents that go, well, this is true. Remember what I told you 2 years ago? This is actually true. Mm-hmm. Yeah, whatever. Who cares?
Yeah.
they're on to the next thing that the government tells them to do or
Yeah,
believe.
and you're still a conspiracy theorist if
Yeah.
you're looking ahead. Dude, Alex Jones was talking about Epstein Island 10, 15 years before that was exposed. You know, he said that 9/11 was going to happen. You know, he said that there are going to be terrorists fly planes into buildings in New York, and they're going to blame it on a man named Osama bin Laden. He said that months before it actually happened. You know, we're running out of conspiracy theories, you know, but still, if you question the authority, somehow you're a bad guy. And on that, you know what drives me crazy now? Remember like music back in the 90s when we were all in high school, and you know, you'd be hanging out with your friends, you'd be running around, you'd be doing your thing. Everything was anti-authority.
Yeah.
You know, Rage Against the Machine, FU won't do what you tell me, you know, and now Rage Against the Machine specifically and all these other bands now, like now, and I have to believe that this was a government project. There's probably a name for it. It's probably classified, documented somewhere. But somehow, you know, they took all these musicians now, and now it's not cool to question authority. You know, now you're all these bad things if you don't question authority. Questioning authority was like the prime element of art. You know, artists and free thinkers. You know, questioning authority, not necessarily hating authority all the time. You know, I don't hate authority. I think authority is necessary in a lot of different roles, but you got to question it. You know, at least in your own mind. You know, you have to have situations where you're like, I don't know if I should comply with this. Like, I don't know if I should be cool with this.
Yeah, well, Project Mockingbird, right? I mean, they were able to get journalists, the CIA, Project Mockingbird was able to get journalists to spew their propaganda. So it can be done. It's like you said, maybe there's some secret conspiracy right now that CIA has on with the musicians, because you're right. How crazy of a turn of events is that? We went from Woodstock, you know, everybody protesting the Vietnam War, to Rage Against the Machine, like you talked about. That's only 20 years ago, a little bit more than 20 years ago. To everybody, if you question the government, you're a conspiracy theorist. That is a nuts turn of events.
Yeah, it's a complete 180 in how people think.
I don't think there could be more of an extreme example of a 180.
In a very short amount of time.
Right.
Yeah. You know, and I don't think any of that's by mistake. I mean, you got to figure, you know, like, so we're supposed to trust these people, and that's not because these people aren't intelligent. They are intelligent. I just don't think that they're benevolent. You know, they're highly intelligent. In fact, I think the reason they look at the population as stupid cattle, and I kind of understand why, because that's how the population acts. They act like sheep, so they're treated like sheep, you know, and the IQ level is probably really high with most of these people in these elite positions. The level of sociopaths is probably equally as high. You know, like I don't know if you can even get to those high levels without making some decisions and making some choices that you have to have no heart over. You know, but I don't know. These people, they get into these roles, and then they expect that level of trust, but there's no consistency to trust. You know, and then, but I really strongly believe that if, you know, so they have all these tools at their disposal, and I think psychology has to be one of their primary tools. You know, psychological warfare. I think spiritual warfare, psychological warfare, I think those are the real battles that we're fighting. You know, and I think it trickles into all forms of entertainment. I think it trickles into pretty much everything. But, you know, with music, we've absolutely seen that since we were in high school. Music has completely shifted from it's not cool to trust authority to now, you know, you're just some toothless hillbilly if you don't.
Well, you know, one of the interesting things Steve and I were talking about before you came on was like, you have a vast amount of knowledge of all these different unique kind of out of the box thinking ideas, but what's the thing that really binds all of those together for you? And the thing that I came up with was that there's a spiritual grounding for you that a lot of the things you think come from that base. Mm-hmm. So whether it's maybe the flat earth, because there's some religious undertones to that, doesn't have to be, of course, but there could be. to what the government's doing, what the one world government might be doing, and why they're doing it, to all kinds of different other things. I mean, can you talk about that a little? I know it's a broad question, but is there anywhere you can start with that? Because I think it's important.
Yeah, that's a good question. You're thinking like a conspiracy theorist, getting right to the root of it all. That's a good question. I would say for me, probably what most of it's rooted in, if I were to get right down to the nitty-gritty of what it's all about, I believe in God, and I believe in Satan. I think God exists. I think he created Satan. I think this world is a battle of good and evil. I think Satan is a fallen angel. I think he took a third of the angels with him. I think, God is our creator. And I think that takes way less faith for me even than believing in a theory. I will call it a conspiracy theory of Big Bang. Nobody was there. Nobody knows. Nobody saw. But biblically, it's explained.
You don't think that a giant explosion could create something as complex as the human brain?
That something can come from nothing, life can come from non-life. Like, that is hard for me. I just don't even know how to get there.
It's so complex,
Yeah.
right? Like, you could even, like, the people that believe in evolution, oh, we're constantly evolving. Well, to some form, yes, species do evolve in the sense of climates and, things like that. Your body adapts to certain things. But I'm like, since I've been alive, I'm only 44, but I have not yet seen a fish jump out of the water, sprout legs, and start walking in my lifetime. Am I missing something? Have you, like...
You need a time lapse of like 34 billion years. Yeah.
Okay. Because, but human life is so complex, right? Like, the amount of things that have to go right to even have human life, that there's no, I just can't wrap my head around that there's any possible way that a giant explosion, two rocks collided, and all of a sudden we have like things this complex. Like, it definitely has a feel of, like, think of anything like a computer made by a man with a brain that could comprehend what does this thing need to do. It's like master design, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. I can't wrap my mind around that. Like, I just can't find it in my soul to put faith in that, and that's one of the things, like, a lot of the slogans that you'll hear today from musicians and politicians is believe in yourself and, just believe in you and
you do you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're good enough. Like, yeah.
Yeah. And there's a phrase in there somewhere I'm trying to find, and it's not coming to me, but like, follow your heart. I mean, I think that's what it is. Follow your heart. And our hearts are garbage most of the time, but I do think that we have a certain intuition in our soul. I think God gives us a certain something, the Holy Spirit, you can call it whatever you want, but he gives us a certain discernment, I think. And I think that it's not follow your heart in terms of like follow your emotions, because your emotions are going to lie to you 100 times a day.
You call it gut instinct?
Yeah. He gives you like kind of a gut instinct, and I think that's from him. We've probably all been in those scenarios where maybe you're in a public place, especially if you're there like with your family, but you could be by yourself, and you just get this feeling. You just observe a few things around you. You get this sense, you get this vibe, and you're like, you know what? I'm going to go left up here, or I'm going to turn around and go the other way, or I'm going to go home. I'm going to get out of the situation, and you might not ever know why, but I think we get those things. That's kind of how I feel about a lot of that stuff. I don't need science, and science is theory. All science is theory. It's man-made explanations, and there's a lot of principles and rules that we can trust in a lot of environments, but that's theory. But, to answer your question, I think that's where I see it all is. It's really, truly a battle of good and evil. There is a God and there is an enemy, and they're both fighting for our attention. That's what I believe. I think for the time being, I think Satan has the deed to the earth, and I think he has a lot of people who follow him. And I don't think it's I think a lot of people follow them just with their flesh and with their decisions, and with their human nature is more dominant than a relationship they have with God, with something that'll make them better. But I do think that some of the people in the highest levels, I serve God directly, personally and directly. I serve him with my family. We go to church. He's a constant, present part of our day-to-day lives. I think people have that same relationship with the enemy. Some do. And I think a lot of them in very high places do too. You know, I think you see things like, so in biblical times, you know, they would sacrifice babies to Baal. They'd have this bronze statue, and it would be under flames, and they'd literally put their babies into this. And they didn't do that for fun. They didn't do it because somebody made up some saying or ritual or song. And then, all right, well, let's just try that. Let's just see. No, who does that? Who does that with their own kids? They did it because there really was power behind them, what they were doing. They were serving a quote unquote God. I think the modern day version of that, I think, is abortion. I think that's why that's so important to some of these people to keep it around. I get the arguments. I get the sympathy that we need to have, you know, the understanding that we need to have in situations where young women are in really, really difficult positions. I understand that. And I'm not saying that we should neglect empathy where empathy is due. But I think as a whole, I think that system, you know, what was it a few years ago in New York? There were more black babies aborted than born. You know, that's heartbreaking to me. I think it's that continued sacrifice of serving that same God.
This it sounds to me like you're talking about Satan worship. I mean, is that the way we actually want to say it?
Ultimately, that's what it is, yeah.
So as a Christian, you know, we have church every week. We have the Bible. That is what brings us as Christians together. That's what grounds us. That's our guidance. Mm-hmm. What do Satanists have to bring them together? Is there any books? Is there any other than the Bible? There's some stuff in the Bible, of course, but that's, I wouldn't say that would be something that would bring people together. Is there stuff out there that we're not aware of, that normal people aren't aware of, that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of paths to that. I think there's a lot of paths to occultism and to Satanism. I think in a lot of cases, it's generational, families. There's a lot of like incestual bloodlines, even within like our banking system. A lot of these elite families that are in power today have been for literally centuries, many, many, many decades. Same bloodlines. I think that's why pedophilia is a major part of it. Abuse, satanic ritual abuse. They do this to their children. They pimp out their children. They use their children for rituals and sacrifices in some cases. And that's why child trafficking is so big. A lot of those children are used for that type of thing too. But you create this trauma. You create this trauma in these kids, and they grow up and they perpetuate that too as they get older. You know, but you hear about these musicians and celebrities and stuff like that, and you hear about them selling their soul. Like, that's not a figurative thing. They whether or not you can sell your soul, I guess you could debate whether or not you're ever irredeemable and can't come back and call out to God and not have that be your future. I think that's always on the table as long as you're breathing. But they do that. They literally sign these contracts and they do blood oaths. And from what I've heard, oftentimes they have to sacrifice someone in their own family. There has to be a blood sacrifice, and they get initiated into that. And then they get in situations where we're seeing it like with the Diddy situation. They get blackmailed.
You're talking about Justin Bieber having to lick Diddy's beehole. I don't think you can come back from that.
So whether or not Justin sold a soul, I have no idea. I don't know how many buttholes were involved in all that. But I actually really hope that – I think Justin Bieber was a victim.
Oh, for
and
sure.
I hope and pray that little dude is all right. You know, like even if he did illegal wrong things into adulthood, I feel like he's been a victim since he was a little kid. And I don't know. I think his whole story is kind of heartbreaking, and I hope that dude's all right. You know, I hope he makes it out of all this okay, because I don't think he deserves any wrath. You know, considering he was
13, 14,
dude,
whatever.
Just a little dude trying to
like
make
his parents
it,
deserve some wrath. I mean, they.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like he's 13, 14, dude, and they just.
Yeah, his parents, his mom. That's another story. you know, but I don't think he knew what he was doing. But I do think a lot of these celebrities and actors, like, they literally do that and they put themselves in these positions and they sell away their soul. And that's why they become these propaganda machines. You know, that's why they, I've seen even like hip hop artists, these rappers talk about how they get paid more money the more they talk about certain things and certain scenarios, because they want to, it's that psychological warfare. Now the major consumers of their music are being influenced with this negativity, you know, with this evil, with these evil thoughts and mindsets. And now it becomes cool to do that. It becomes cool to be destructive to your own culture. It becomes cool to do these horrible things and have these horrible mindsets. And then you perpetuate that to your kids. So yeah, I think all that stems from those things. But yeah, I think a lot of the things that happen in the world are happening from these people, from these elites. And I think some of them directly serve Satan himself. And I think the vast majority of the people in the middle, they're just kind of in the middle, and their day-to-day war is their spirit versus their flesh, and they're being tugged on both sides. All of us are, you know. And then every day is a decision of, you know, how much we want to deny one for the other.
That's the easy choice, right? That they serve yourself, my pleasure first.
Yeah,
what's
that's
important
fun.
to me first. That's the easy. As a human, that's the easy choice.
Yeah.
You don't have to have any kind of faith in anything or anybody to just go, this feels good.
Yeah, faith is scary.
Regardless of who it may hurt
Yeah.
or not. That's the easy path.
Yeah.
I think most people will tend to follow the path of least resistance, right?
Yeah.
And that happens to be it, like by design.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, well, and I think that's exactly right. And I think serving your flesh too, serving yourself, there's a certain like arrogant confidence that comes along with that when you feel like you got things in control. You know, like you're trusting yourself, and so when things are good, when things are going relatively okay, you feel like it's because of you.
Right.
You know, like, oh yeah. And then the second, you know, dude, tomorrow something horrible happens and the rug gets ripped out from under you, and you realize you got no control over anything. You know, so those are the times where we come to faith. You know, like the churches were full after 9/11. You know, everybody had faith after 9/11 because people were scared and they realized how powerless they were. You know, they realized how unimportant they were in the grand scheme of things. You know, but yeah, the churches were full after 9/11. But then you have times of peace. In fact, I think we're seeing that. Talk about theory. I think that's exactly what we're seeing in the United States. What we've seen in the United States over the last 100 years. We've had it so good being a first world country. You know, like we've been in Disneyland over here. We've been able to get jobs, buy homes, do what we want, say what we want, think what we want, hang out with who we want, travel where we want. You know, like the only things we were limited by is whatever we didn't have the motivation to go do. You know, and I think that as beautiful and amazing as that is, I think after we've had that as a country for so many years, we just assume that's how life was, when that's not the way it's been. That's not the way it's been for other people. That's not the way it's been for other countries. We were in Disneyland, and our confidence, we got so complacent. We think that we are above being in a totalitarian situation. We think we're above being in a communist or dictator type situation. You know, like we've been completely just brainwashed and numbed to the idea, you know, that the horrible things we hear about happening in other places could be us. You know what that saying, freedom's a generation away. It only takes one generation of brainwashing to the point where we just forget what any of that even was. We accept all the new norms, you know.
Well, people are told that kind of stuff can't happen again, can't happen here because all of the atrocities were so bad. Oh, we'd see that coming a mile away.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this in depth. Like Hitler didn't start out saying, hey, man, let's just go fire some Jews in an oven, right? He started out very as a kind of an idealist in a time where the initial ideas, people were like, hey, man, that doesn't seem too bad because times were tough.
Yeah.
So it was like, hey, hey, let's give this guy a try. All the while, probably in his mind, he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
But then, 10 years of absolute, his rise to power. And then after that, so you're not going to see it coming a mile away, right? It's going to be somebody coming in with some ideas. Hey man, let's try this. This is gonna. People are hurting, right? The people that are looking for the government handout, they're just looking for, hey man, the government's going to take care of me. It's all good. So the government comes in and says, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is the program we're going to roll out. And then slowly but surely they gain their foothold. And it's not an overnight thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think people would just get conditioned. And that's why we see like 30 different flavors of socialism being thrown out there, right? Because people like, you know, it's really, socialism is one of those things where it's like, we could all come up with our own version of it and make it sound pretty good. You know, if everybody in this building wanted to start like a commune, a socialistic form of functioning would work. It would make sense on a small scale. It just doesn't make sense on a big scale, you know. But that's the thing is like, talk about indoctrination too, and like changing mindsets over a couple generations. I remember when I was little, it was just inherently known that you learn history because those who don't are destined to repeat it. You know, and there's certain things you don't want to repeat. Like that's like just completely gone now. You know, and that's one of the things like when I have discussions with some of my Democrat friends or liberal friends, that's what they seem to forget. Like they'll have these ideas. I'm like, yeah, but that's been done. You know, like we've already seen that. We already know where that goes. You know, like why would we repeat the same mistake? And in some cases, I'll bring up a certain time period or a certain historical thing, and it's like they have no idea that thing even happened. At least they might say they do, but I can tell they don't really know like the weight of it. Yeah,
it'll be different here.
It'll be different this time
because our government cares about us.
It's never been done. It's never worked, but this time because somebody made it sound really good to me, let's just go try it. You don't do that.
Well, and the general consensus on most of those is the word free. Free healthcare, free education, free, like it's, people just go, oh, hell yeah, man, free stuff, I'm in.
Well, but when you subsidize 8 different things for them before they're out of high school, free becomes a tangible thing that they think exists.
Yeah, it's hard to win an election when you're not giving stuff away, when you're not telling people what you're going to do for them. Mm-hmm. Instead, we need to, in my opinion, we need to pull back all kinds of stuff. We need to get rid of stuff. We need to stop the spending. I mean, that's one of the biggest things we can do. But the government, and this is like, there's a snowball effect. These politicians, to get elected, I mean, that's the game for a politician, to get elected, to stay alive, I guess, if you could say, if you want to put it in human terms, to stay alive. And you need to keep getting reelected. And to do that, you have to promise things. And what do promising entail? That means taxing people and using money to bring to them all these amazing things like we talked about, health care or child care or all kinds of different things that in the private sector should and always has provided, but now the government is just slowly eroding and taking away. And every time they give you something else or they promise you something else, a couple things happen. One, they have to take your money to give it back to you. And two, they end up just becoming, they have more power. They end up having more power over you. And we end up with a society where we have less and less power, less and less money, and they can do whatever they want. Just like in COVID, was there anybody held accountable for that? No, Fauci was the highest paid government employee. He made more than the president of the United States, and now he has a cushy job at Georgetown. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's the snowball that we see happening is this constant rolling of politicians getting reelected and promising and taking and taking. It's like, here, we'll take your freedom, and in return we'll give you that safety.
And then nobody goes and there's no checks and balance on those programs either. Hey, we instituted this program that we took your tax dollars for, and we just go, okay, cool, Department of Education, right? Like, people are up in arms. What? Trump says he wants to do away with that? Oh my God, think of the children. Well, think of the children before 1980 when it was put into place.
It's a pretty good place.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, we're still at the bottom in the world rank of people that have formal education. Like, we're always ranked at the bottom.
When we keep throwing money at it.
We need more money. Department of Education. Like, so there's no checks and balances. Hey, man, okay, tell you what, we're going to give you this money, and in 4 years, we're going to come back, we're going to knock on the door, we're going to open up the books, we're going to see what happened, we'll see what kind of good change resulted as a result of this program. Yeah. Nobody does that. And then they just forget about it. And then it's just, no, it has to be this. We have to have this program.
Yeah. You know, it really bothers me too about like what you were talking about, like with the programs, and that these political influences, these powers that be, that they take good things and they just pervert them and they use them as tools to control and to manipulate. Like we see it happen with every phrase. You take the term like racist, right? Like that word should mean something. Like when we hear it, that should mean something to us. But it's been so abused and so just thrown around. It just, I don't like you, you're a racist. And, like that sucks. That sucks that the power's been taken out of words like that. I think it's the same type of thing. Like nobody even takes it serious anymore. I could care less if I'm called half the things that you're not supposed to be anymore because it just words have lost meaning. But I feel like the same thing with like these programs. They take advantage of these programs. So you take something like welfare, right? Like there's scenarios where people are down and out. They're in scenarios where maybe they lost loved ones or whatever. They don't have a support system. Maybe they get laid off and they have children, and by no fault of their own, they're a single parent. And those scenarios happen. Those bad situations happen. I don't think anybody would look at that and be like, hey, a program to help those people, that's cool. Churches do that all the time. Like that's the right thing to do. That's a benevolent thing to do. But what sucks is they take all these benevolent functions and processes and ideals and they push them and they take advantage of them and they use them and they abuse them to a point where it's just not okay anymore. And now because you can't support what it's turned into, feminism did this too. Now because I can't support what it turned into, now I'm no longer benevolent. My heart's no longer in the right place. You now hate these people. You don't want to help them. You're a bigot. You're a racist. So you become the enemy of what that thing served publicly because you don't like the way the program has been run. You don't like the abuse that's gone on in it. And it'd be the same type of thing. Like if we were all buddies and let's say like one of us started smoking crack, like, right? So you start smoking crack. Ryan's a big crackhead now. And
I could see that.
Yeah. Well, that's why I brought it up because I could. Yeah.
We've been meaning to talk to you about this.
Yeah. So when we ended up in this situation with him, like one of the things that we would do, we would get together and any of us buddies would get together and figure out like, hey, how do we help this guy? Like, what do we do? Maybe, and especially like if one of us was in that spot and we're out on the street now, right? Like we're homeless or whatever, and we just lost everything, ruined everything. You would try to help them to a degree. You can only help to a degree. We might, give you a roof, give you food, give you clothes, give you a place to shower, try to help you find a job. But at some point, if you don't want to help yourself, we'd have to pull back. Like you can only do that for so long before you're enabling them to just stay there forever. And I think that's what's happened with a lot of our government programs. That's what's happened with welfare. That's what's happened in a lot of situations. It's become a subsistence program. It's become a job. It's become a payroll. It's become, it's not about anymore lifting people out of where they're at. And some people, again, by no choice of their own, might have to perpetually be there. That's fine too. That's okay too. We should help them. We should take care of them. But I think a lot of these programs have just been so abused to where they become almost the opposite of what they were intended to be. And that's heartbreaking to me, is when the benevolence of people, the good hearts of people, are taken advantage of and abused, and now they're demonized because they can't get behind what it's become.
Well, I think there's a part of the population that are religious, whether it's Christians or Jews or Muslims. They believe that, a lot of them believe that the community should take care of each other. That's what the role of nonprofits or churches are for. And then there's half of the country who thinks the government's for everything. They've been, whether that's something that is innate to them or whether they've been trained to think that, that's how they think. And and so that's the fight. It's basically the fight between Democrats and Republicans. I think Republicans, or you could say conservatives, they're not necessarily exclusive to each other, but I would say that conservatives are for limited government, limited as much as humanly possible because we don't want people in our business. On the other hand, Democrats want more government. They think the government is the solution. And we see the government as it's a necessary evil. Like every single word out of your mouth needs to be checked. you do not get 1 ounce of power without it being checked. Like everything needs to be checked constantly. And so it's an interesting thing because it's such an important role. And for a certain group of people to be like, yeah, just do whatever. Take my money, spend it. Spend it. And it's clear that they've been very inefficient with these. They lie to us constantly. It is interesting to me how anybody could trust them. Anybody could just say, yeah. Take my money. Here you go. Do whatever you will with it.
Yeah, I wish I could.
Keep perpetuating.
I think more importantly is they don't necessarily want you to take their money. They want you to take the rich guy's money. Well, he's got more. Take his. That's also a very common theme of that.
Yeah,
group
tax
of people
the
is
rich.
fair share. Got to pay their fair share.
Yeah, no, I love that there's rich people. You know, that means that as long as there's rich people who came from little or nothing, there's a path for me to be there too. You know, and not that that's my goal is to be filthy rich. It's absolutely not. I'm not super driven by that. You know, but I like that that's there. I like that's an opportunity for people to do.
You can't punish successful people.
Yeah. If you have a good enough idea and you work hard enough, like that's the American dream.
There's
right?
something inherently wrong. I think people know this down to their core. When you put it the way that Steve put it, you know, what is it? Not tax the rich, but
fair share.
Pay your fair share. It's such a slander. It's
who determines that?
Hits you deep. Like, yeah, why? You're the one who gets to determine who pays their fair share, and because they're successful, they're paying. It's something that I don't think any of us are rich here, but I feel it like, man, like that's wrong, man. Let the guy or let the gal, let them be successful. That is what makes our country great.
Yeah.
And to punish people like that, we're going to end up in a bad place. If we allow government officials to talk like that, that gets into people's head and they think, oh, well, rich people are bad.
Well, first of all, there's no law, and it's certainly not in the Constitution. They have to pay income tax to begin with. That income tax is theft. There's no law on the books that requires you to pay taxes. If you don't, they'll come after you. They'll get you. But there's no law that even says you have to pay income tax.
An independent agency that's not a government agency is going to come
after you. A non-elected bureaucratic agency, yeah. And and all those powers that be that we talked about before, you know, and the central banking system, the IRS, and they beefed up their staff by 40,000 people or whatever it is. You know, they'll come after you. You'll do time. You'll go away. But there is no law that requires you to do it. A law cannot be cited. And people have challenged this, and they've taken it to court, and they've lost. But that doesn't change the fact that there's still no law. But what we should be looking at is not people who, whether they started wealthy or not, successful people, and demonize them for being good at what they do, especially in the cases where they did it honorably. You know, I'm sure there's many cases where they didn't, but let's assume they did. That's a cool thing. I want to see people like that. That's aspiring. You know, that's why we have shows like Shark Tank that are so popular and things like that, because those systems work, you know, because capitalism works, and because it innovates ideas and thinkers. And no matter how many times they fail, you see that spirit of these people who get up and they get up again and they get up again and they fail a million times and they retool and they do this. And some of them hit eventually, some of them don't. But still, it's inspiring for me just to see them try. I love seeing that. What we should be looking at is these politicians who make $150,000 a year and end up with a $30 million bankroll in a few years. That's problematic to me. Like, that's so clearly problematic. But when will you ever hear the news talk about that? No, they're going to demonize people who actually work their ass off to make their money in intelligent ways, provided jobs and insurance and income and homes for people, gave them got to where they could afford cars and to raise families. That's great work. That's great work, being able to do that for other people. You know, but they will never, ever, ever, you know, talk about Nancy Pelosi's inside trading and how these people become millionaires off $150,000, $200,000 a year. I don't care how good of an investor you are. That's really, really difficult to do. You'd have to be insanely lucky. And the percentage of them that are able to do that, and it's not just one side either. It happens on both sides. You know, I think the politicians at those levels, in most cases, they're two sides of the same coin. You know, that's why for me, like, you know, I don't even like identifying with a specific party because I hate what the leadership in those parties represent almost all the time.
Well, who writes the tax code?
Who writes the tax code? That's a good question.
I would imagine that the same people that are saying the rich need to pay their fair share, who also benefit greatly from the tax code being the way it is, why don't they just change it then?
Yeah. Well, and that's what Trump was saying too, right? When he was talking to Hillary when they were doing their debates in 2016, she was like, you know, you use loopholes, and he's like, yeah, that just makes me smart. The loopholes are there.
You guys created them.
Yeah. Me and all your donors use them. All of us use them. They're there. There's ways out of paying taxes on this. Why would I not do that as a good businessman? You know, oh, I cannot do that. I cannot pay those taxes. I cannot use that. And they say loophole like it's illegal or it's some slimy trick. No, it's an option. You do this thing, you don't pay that tax. Oh, you know what? No, I'm not going to take advantage of that. I'd rather pay these millions of dollars in taxes.
Yeah, go find me some liberal who does that.
Yeah.
Who just hands over their extra money to the IRS when they don't need to.
Well, I'm sure Nancy Pelosi does.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Well, exactly what Trump told her, though, when they were doing those debates, is he was like, you know, you've been around a long time. He was like, when have you ever advocated for changing the tax code? And he was like, you won't, because all of your donors take advantage of it too. Yeah, and I'm sure she has too. You know, but those loopholes are not, you know, it's not really any different than what was it, the Land Rovers that they had for a while, where if you had like an LLC, you could basically get a Land Rover like subsidized or tax free, and then it would kind of, you could write off the payments to where you didn't essentially end up getting it for free.
Yeah,
there's 1,000 ways to work the system.
Yeah, so I remember specifically like the G-Wagon.
The G-Wagon, that's what it was.
They made it the way, because it has to do with gross vehicle weight, curb weight.
Yeah.
Not loaded down, curb weight. It had to be a certain length, and it had to weigh, it was like over 6,000 or 6,500 pounds curb weight. And then you could immediately write off 50% of it the first year. And it's like, so, okay, that's $150,000 vehicle. I could spend 75 grand. Okay, done. Right? Like, who's, so,
and that's technically a loophole.
right. So Mercedes was like,
But it's not illegal.
it's not illegal.
I mean,
Those things are built in.
Yeah.
They're built in to be used. They say loophole like it's
they make it sound bad.
yeah, like you found some illegal back door. It's not illegal. That's another thing that drives me crazy, though, that we see so much in the mainstream is like it's the use of words, whether it's loophole or conspiracy theory, or you hear these terms, and we've been so indoctrinated and ingrained that when you hear those things in your mind, there's an instant negativity associated with them. And then you hear other terms where there's an instant positivity associated, where there probably shouldn't be. And almost every program we hear, almost every bill that's written, you know, they'll have some bill where it's like, oh, it's a bill for the border, or it's a bill for taxes, or it's a bill for relief for this thing. And a few sentences will be about that thing, and then they'll bloat it and pack it with 500 other things. Well, we're also going to send 30 million here, which for a certain politician, that's just them keeping their word for some kickback that they got. They're, you know, that's just people scratching each other's back. So
Gender studies in Pakistan.
yeah, underwater basket weaving in Bolivia.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Pakistan is pretty set on their gender studies.
But that's what's crazy to me is, so they'll call a bill one thing, and then it'll have, dude, some of these bills literally have thousands of pages in them of other things. And so, and they'll do that because now it's like if the other party rejects it, oh, you're going to reject a bill that would help all these people? And it's like, no, I'm rejecting everything else in it. You know, give me a bill that's just for that. That's a different story. That we can do. But everything's convoluted like that on purpose. You know, but there's most of these agencies and programs and things that they come out with, they'll call it one thing. I'm trying to think of an example now. But it's almost always the exact opposite of what they actually name it and what they call it.
Well, it's like the Affordable Care Act being, was it 1,500
that's a great
pages of
example.
legislation. And Nancy Pelosi was saying, just sign it. guys, we got to do this now. Just sign it. We'll figure it out later. We'll read it later. Meanwhile, in Arizona, SB 1070, 4 pages of legislation. Pump the brakes on this. We really got to dig into this document and find out what this is really about. Well, there was a clause in the Affordable Care Act that because through the city, my health care plan was considered a Cadillac plan, the $20,000 a year that the city pays for my health care was going to be taxable income to me. So I never get to see that money. The city pays that directly to Blue Cross, whomever. But that 20 grand that the city pays got put on my wages as taxable income.
Yeah, because they paid it with pre-tax dollars, and now they're going to take.
So I get to pay the tax. I get to pay tax for having being one of those people that's motivated to have a good job or a career instead of just a job that happens to have great health care. Hey, here's your 20 grand and extra that you're going to have to pay taxes on.
Yeah.
And that didn't get found out until it got challenged and ended up getting struck down in court. But that was one of those things of like, hold on, man, that's not cool. That's not okay. But no, just sign it. Just sign it. We'll figure it out later. We got to get this thing passed.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of those other terms too? I know we all know a bunch of those. Even like reproductive freedom, right? That sounds very positive, but it's not about the freedom to reproduce. It's about the freedom. It's about the incentivizing things that help you not produce.
Yeah, abortion has a bunch of those. Like reproductive freedom is, I think that's the most ridiculous one.
Yeah.
But like a woman's right to health care or women's health care, it's like, is abortion's really health care?
Yeah.
Like that doesn't make any sense.
Just calling it health care.
Just calling it health. I mean, so what they're doing is they're really just twisting the words to make you think something is, it makes you avoid what the real atrocities that are going on there. Yeah. They just want you to think that it's all about women.
Now I can call it that, and that feels way better than talking about pulling limbs out of vaginas. Yeah. Like that feels nice.
It's all about like we're taking care of the women. Yet nobody talks about, at least on the left, pro-abortion people, nobody talks about the babies. Yeah. Nobody. And it's because it's impossible to talk about that in a positive light. It's impossible. So they can't talk about it at all.
Well, and that's what's funny is like you can rally so hard on 1,000 different aspects of human rights, but those rights end if you haven't crowned yet. If you're not crowning,
if you get caught driving drunk, hit a pregnant mother, and she dies, and therefore then the baby dies because it's not sustainable outside of the womb yet. So still in the term where they think it's okay to kill them. Yeah. You get 2 charges. Yeah. And Democrats support that wholeheartedly. 2 charges because you killed a mother and an unborn child. 2 charges of premeditated murder, manslaughter, whatever it may be.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
But it's totally cool if they make the choice themselves.
Well, and that's the thing. See, that's why I have such a hard time with so much of that is like, it's just so intellectually inconsistent. Like it's so inconsistent. And I feel like, and this can happen on both sides. I feel like sometimes it just, you either have enough friends and family who buy into that flavor of politics or that flavor of thinking, but it really becomes a religion in most cases where now it's like, all right, I'm already sold. Like nobody's ever going to talk me out of it. So whatever you tell me that supports it, even if it's a slogan or if it's garbage or if it's I don't care. Like it supports what I think. I'm not changing my mind anyway. It very much becomes a religion like that, and that's what's crazy to me, And I mean that subject alone is funny too because most of the people who are the most hardcore that way would be very anti-religion. They'd be anti anything bigger than them, anti-God, anti-church, anti any type of religion. While the whole time they're very much serving their own religion devoutly, and they put an incredible amount of faith into things unseen, into their religion, And that's why for me, like being a Christian, being a believer in God, believing that there's a creator, I think it takes way less faith than being a political fanatic half the time,
I don't know how you, I don't know how you cannot. I feel like when things are hard, everybody goes through hard times, right? Like you need a place where you can go to get back to center, right? Yeah. And for Christians, that's prayer. Somewhere, reading the Bible, going back to faith, going back to Jesus and his teachings. But when you don't have that, you're just flailing around constantly. Do you ever have anything to really ground yourself? Does that just open you up to any whim that somebody that you might have, has some influence over you? I mean, because it seems to me that if you really took 2 seconds to think about what you're saying with the abortion deal, with the trans deal, I mean, the fact that you're okay with letting minors, I mean, you'll see people walk around the street and ask young people, mostly young people, like, are you okay with should a 13-year-old be able to get a tattoo? No. Should a 13-year-old be able to transition, basically cut off your breast, have a sex change? Oh yeah, well that's different. How can you justify even?
We sure got there quick, huh?
How does your brain work in a way that that's allowed? It's obviously extreme propaganda, and if you don't have anywhere to like base yourself and go, wait, is this what's truly okay here? Like, it's not okay, but I could see the consistency if you're like, yeah, a 13-year-old should be able to do it, tattoos, like whatever. I can see the consistency there. I don't think it's right, but the inconsistency is crazy. It's like they want you to believe two things that are diabolically different at the same time, and that happens all over the place.
Trying the thought to even think that, like, trying to think that a 6-year-old, because some of these cases are even younger than 13, but like that a 6-year-old can make that choice. They're in this frame of mind. But I don't know about you. I want to be a pirate when I was 6, or an astronaut. I didn't even know space was fake until just now. But I wanted to, some things like that you wanted to do when you were 6. Thank God my parents were like, "No, idiot, you're not going to be a pirate.
Yeah.
Okay, you're not going to be you can't make that at 6 years old. You cannot make that.
Can't.
You don't even have the wherewithal to understand what that is, let alone
you can't drive until you can't drink until you're 20. There's all kinds of age restricted rules. Yet, they want not only that. Some states want to take the parents out of the equation. If you don't
remove
affirm
the child.
Well,
if you
child
don't
abuse if you say no.
If you don't affirm,
Tell me that's not evil and demonic, dude, all in itself.
It's probably the most evil thing that we've seen in our lifetimes, at least.
It just the concept of that, the fact that there are adults advocating for that to be a thing, just reeks of evil.
Like your only job as a parent for quite some time is saving your kids from their own demise. You know what I mean? Like that's at the core of what it is. Hey man, don't put your finger in that light socket. Like, what do your kids want to do dumb stuff. And as a parent, you're like, you have to love your kids enough to go, hey, look, this decision, you're going to hate me for this right now.
Yeah.
There's plenty of decisions.
But that's the role.
Yeah. Plenty of decisions my dad made for me until I was 18. That was my dad's rule. You can't make decisions for yourself till you're 18 because you live in my house. Plenty of them that I thought, old man's crazy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I look back on now that I have kids that are 17 and 21, and I go, dude, he was actually pretty smart.
Yeah.
I thought he was
Isn't that
dumb
funny
this
how
whole
it
time.
works?
And I don't regret a thing about any of those things that I thought pisses me off. And, my friends get to do this. Now I'm like, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. You saved me from a lot of crap.
Well, the fact that government or politicians would care what goes on in my home outside of doing things illegal, if I'm bringing illegal activity in my home or I'm physically abusing my child, if I'm not breaking the law, the fact that why do they want to get in my home? Why do they want to get to my kids?
They want to get in your head.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think.
Well, probably at its most innocent. Yeah. They want to be able to propagandize them. We see a lot of that happening in school, with a lot of these
We got to create the next generation.
weird
of
ass programs. Yeah. And starting young from a brainwashing perspective is important to them, and that's another term, just brainwashing in general. Like even that is kind of, people hear that term and they think it's like just some fantasy fake thing. That's very, very real. Brainwashing is a thing. Like there's a scientific process for doing it. There's a psychological process for doing it. There's a social process for doing it. Like you can be brainwashed. You absolutely can. Your personality, and I think we had talked before about a little bit about like MK Ultra and those CIA programs that were designed to develop that were taken over from the Nazis after World War II. Where there's drugs and there's trauma and there's things involved to create alters in you to where basically it shatters you into split personalities, and those personalities can be controlled like a puppet on a string. Brainwashing is very real. And I think we see a lot of just real subtle examples of that once you separate from it, they become less subtle. Like you start seeing it. But, you had brought up a really good point too about if you're not grounded in anything, if you don't believe in God, if you don't have something grounding you, you'll be really quickly to be swayed in a lot of those areas. And I think for me, like, that's why it stayed important to me into my adulthood, even more important to me, even more so than in my adulthood, is because I know that I'm not above that. The more that I sway or get away from God, from teachings that I know that are true, from biblical truths, which is, we talk about all the lies and deception. It's the only source of anything I've ever found it's just never lied to me ever. It's never lied to me. It's never steered me wrong. But I know if I get away from that, I will be that person who can be swayed and to do horrible things, think horrible things, if I don't have that home base.
People, it makes you think about, the difference between, are people inherently good and inherently evil? I find myself, you need something good to go back to all the time. Because the older we get, I feel like, when I was younger, I kind of felt like I knew a lot more than I do now. But you have kids and the world changes and you're looking for answers. You want your kids to grow. You have so much responsibility when you have kids and they're going to go out into the world too. And you're like, man, I thought I knew a lot more. And every day and every year that passes, we realize we know less and less. And what that forces you to do drives you to seek wisdom outside of yourself. And if you don't have that, where are you going to get it? Because surely not one of us has enough wisdom by ourselves to be able to navigate this world properly. Yeah. So you could get it from other people. And I think if you're smart, you do find the right people. But if you're in the wrong crowd and you're trying to get wisdom from people who are the wrong people, you just go the wrong way even faster. And so to me, the older I get, and with kids and everything, especially, just accentuates this fact. But I realize, man, I really don't know what to do. Yeah. I have to lean heavily on somebody. And when I think about who that's going to be, I'm like, there's just no other choice. There's no other choice that's a good one. Like, this is the one that's proven over time. Yeah. This is how I'm going to get the most success with my kids and sending them off into the world and getting older and running my business and doing all the stuff that we have to do. It's a clear choice, it seems to me.
Yeah, I love that. You know what I love about that is that was a really good explanation of what actual faith is. Oftentimes people talk about faith and they're like, you're putting a faith into a non-existent whatever. And that sounds dumb when you phrase it that way. But just like trust, faith is built. You start with very, very little, and you just put that little bit of faith forward. And it's like you said, I'm in a situation where I recognize I don't know what to do. I don't have the wisdom. This is beyond me. I'm not great enough or wise enough. I'm not so good that I can navigate this situation that I'm in, or this set of circumstances, or this relationship, or this thing effectively. I know I'll get it wrong. And I think for a lot of people who believe in God, that's how it starts, is you recognize you need something beyond yourself, and you just put that little tiny faith that you might have in. And what do you know? It works out better than it would have had you done it on your own. You already know what doing it on your own looks like. You've done it. Mm-hmm. You've already been there. You know what that whole show looks like. So you do a little faith, and now your faith is a little bit stronger. Maybe just a little bit, but it's a little bit stronger. So then the next time you're in a situation, you're like, you know what? I'm going to put my faith in this, and I'm going to do it this way. Checks out again. Next situation comes up. You might dig a little deeper, put a little more faith into it. It might be a heavier situation, but you know what? It served you well again. That's what faith is. You build into that, and that's why you see, dude, I've known people, men and women in my life, who have this massive, unshakable faith, and it's so admirable, and some of them are the nicest people you'd ever meet, and it seems like they've probably always been that way, and then you hear a little bit about their story and about their background, And you'd never guess in a million years the gnarly stuff that happened to them, the stuff that they went through. And then you realize why their faith is what it is. They weren't born that way. This is it's like a martial art that they developed over a lifetime of testing it and trying it and probably getting it wrong a lot. But that frustrates me when I hear people talk about faith like it's just a blind ignorance. No, we build into that faith, and it's proven to be reliable. We see like these government entities who want to be our God. They want to be our daddy. They want to take care of us. People put an unimaginable amount of faith into these people.
Well, you got to put faith into something. I think that's what it comes down to.
You will serve something.
You will serve something.
Yeah.
Sometimes people do serve themselves, but I think most people realize, whether you're Christians or not, or have some religion at all, that you're weak.
Yeah.
We're all weak compared to this life that we've got to navigate.
We don't want to believe we are. It feels good to not think that way.
Well, but
we are.
Well,
I
the
think
second something bad happens, though.
Yeah. You realize how tiny,
real
powerless
quick,
you really
right.
are. Yeah.
But on the other hand, it feels good to have that humbling experience to go, yeah, I'm not as badass as I thought. And that's okay. That realization is
Because it's the truth.
It's the truth.
Yeah.
Now you don't have to pretend. And a lot of times I don't think it's necessarily something that you're trying to lie to yourself about, but maybe you have confidence and you just don't understand how things work, and you're just like, yeah, and then you have all this confidence and you keep getting these losses, and then the stress builds and you're like, what is going on here? I have all this confidence in myself, and next thing you know, you're stressed out.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, I got to find another way. My way, even though I'm not like some jerk or whatever, my way's not working.
Yeah.
And so you seek other ways, and that taking that pressure off of yourself, I think, and going, I don't have to be this. I don't have to be that. I can just be a normal person and feel really good about what I'm doing. That, I think there's a lot of peace in that. Which when you find that, you're like, that's kind of like, okay, what else you got for me? What else you got for me? How else can you help me? Because this was really cool.
Yeah. Well, and that's where that whole Jesus take the wheel thing comes from, right? It's about, recognizing. I think men struggle with this a lot, but the women I know in my life, they do too. I think this is actually a human condition. Our flesh is constantly wants to take that load on our own shoulders, because if we can bear that weight, we can now brag about the weight we're bearing. We can now flex the fact that we can lift that weight. That guy can't. That guy can't. But look at this
bragging
weight.
rights for sure. Yeah.
Look at this weight I'm bearing, and you're going to trip over a pebble tomorrow, and it's going to crush you to nothing. Like we weren't meant to bear a lot of the weight that we try to bear, but our flesh, our human nature, is constantly trying to take that back on. We're born with that nature. We were given that nature. God created that nature in us. We're constantly trying to take things and put them on us, put them on ourselves, and it's just our pride and it's our ego. It's our desire to control our environments and the things around us, and but yeah, man, like you had said, talked about the relief of it, and I remember one of the major times that I was humbled. That's how I felt, and I just let go of everything, and I'm like, you know what? All I really have to worry about is getting up tomorrow and just really trying to do the right thing with the first scenario that presents itself to me. Maybe I'm walking down the hallway and I see something on the floor, and I know the good thing to do is probably not walk by it and leave it for my wife, but I'm going to pick up that piece of fuzz or paper or poop, whatever it is.
You guys poop in the hallway?
We won't
Saving
get it.
water.
That's
At
for
times.
another
At
podcast.
times.
Yeah.
Okay.
But like, I'm going to pick up that thing. I'm going to do that thing. And I get this wrong all the time. If you were to talk to my wife today, she'd be like, you learned that lesson?
Still stubborn, okay?
Yeah. But just as an example, like I think that's the mindset, is waking up and just, it's the little things. You get consistent with the little things, and you're faithful in the little things, and then the bigger things present themselves to you. The bigger things come, but it provides a certain level of integrity in your life and a certain level of consistency in your life to where you become reliable. You become reliable to the people who are counting on you and that trust you. And it's not because you're taking all that weight on your shoulders, it's because you're trusting God at that point, and you're just kind of letting go of all the other stuff that you have no control over. And it's a difficult place to get to, and it's a difficult place to maintain, because that we talked about that brainwashing. We're not unsusceptible to it just because we're believers. There's a lot of things we're protected from, but we'll never, till our dying breath, we're never going to stop being influenced and pulled.
Well, that's the pull.
Yeah.
And by culture, by society, you could even say by Satan, and then it's the pull back by Jesus.
Yeah.
So people who don't have Jesus just get pulled in one way. They get tossed around like it's a mosh pit, but it's all in one direction. And that's what, sometimes it's hard for me to even believe. I don't even understand how to think like those people. I don't even understand how to get in their heads and go, how do you think that this is okay? I don't get it. And I wonder if, like you talked about at the beginning, people they pick a team, Democrat, Republican, blue, red, RD, and they are 100% on that team no matter what. Like they can say anything, 45% on one side, 45% of the population on the other. They can say anything and you will go for it. And I wonder if that's the case, because they don't have anything pulling them back.
Yeah.
Pulling them out of that vortex going, this is just too much for me. This is too much for me. I can't, it just doesn't align with what I think is truly right.
Yeah. But yeah, what are you basing your alignment on?
Well, most people don't have anything to base it on. That's my point. They're treading water in an ocean where they can't see any land, and they're just going with the waves.
Yeah.
Wherever the current takes them, I think.
Yeah, and at that point, I would imagine it just becomes an assessment of your circle that you live in, right? Like, you see people you want to be more like, you see people you want to be less like, and I think both consciously and subconsciously, that's kind of who we become. Mm-hmm. But I think even more so if you don't have God, if you don't have any biblical reference, if you don't have any foundation for that stuff, and you have no good examples, you have no positivity, where are you going to go? You got nowhere to go. You have no rules to follow other than what's socially cool in that circle that you're in. Mm-hmm. I don't know, man. I think we live in a really weird world, man. And I'll tell you, I think that we were talking about like the good versus evil and the satanic influence and people directly serving Satan. I think I think a lot, even Christians. I think a lot of people really underestimate how present and how real that stuff is. There's that saying that the greatest trick the devil ever did was convincing the world it didn't exist. I think there's truth in that. I think, you watch some of these VMAs and music videos and award shows and stuff like that, and the symbolism is everywhere. It's just ingrained, and the terminology they use in their songs, even the frequency they record their songs at, that's a whole nother conspiracy theory topic.
I've read a little bit about that.
But there's
was it 440 versus 436 or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. I forget the exact ones, but they actually changed the frequency that music was recorded at, because the frequency that they changed it, the frequency it used to be, was a frequency that promotes healing and peace, and then the frequency they change it to creates like an uncomfortableness. It creates tension and anxiety in your body.
There's been a couple Christian artists that I've heard that have gone back to that. I think it's back to 440. I think they went to 436 or something like that. Hertz, or I don't know if it's Hertz or whatever. But I've heard that there's a couple Christian artists who are now making their music
I've read that too,
in that particular frequency.
Well, and there's I remember thinking when I was younger, like you hear frequencies, and I always thought of that as like Sedona, New Age, and crystals, and it always sounded very like mystic and things like that. But as I've gotten older, I really feel like, I think it can get into that stuff, but I think God created everything's a frequency. Every light we see is those light waves are at a certain frequency. Every sound we hear, the variations in tone and sound, it's because they're operating under different frequencies.
String theory. I mean, string theory isn't it's a theory. At best, it's a theory, but that the base level that physicists think that the universe exists from are strings vibrating, and that's how matter is created. Well, not created, but how it manifests itself. So
Through
yeah,
the
it's the
vibrations.
It's as of right now, it's the most fundamental thing we can think of at this point in history or this point in time. Yeah.
That's a fascinating topic, and I'm certainly not an expert on that. But I've seen, in fact, next time we get together, we should talk about some of that. We'll talk about Tartaria, the mud floods, and the world conventions, and
Yes.
but along those lines, but vibration and stuff like that. It used to be that every major city center had a big bell, and those bells were typically at certain frequencies, and those frequencies now are known to be healing frequencies. So those frequencies would kind of send vibrations through the town. Everybody that heard it was taking those vibrations in through their ears, through their body, and those are supposed to be peace-setting frequencies, mentally soothing frequencies, healing frequencies for your body. And then they have those Rife machines that people have said, will send certain frequencies into your body and actually heal certain things, and it'll damage cancer cells. And
They're making clothes. They're making bed sheets that have, I guess, they have frequency. Somehow they can determine what the frequency is of certain cloth or material. So they make sheets, and I think they said
I know they like
silk.
grounding sheets.
They do have grounding sheets, but that's not the same. They have, and I don't know if these are like widely available, but I was listening to a podcast about this at one point, and there's companies that make clothing and make things that you wear or things that you touch, because that apparently puts off a frequency, and that frequency makes you feel better.
Yeah.
So,
well, dude, I saw a video of a guy talking about this, and it might have been, what was his name? John Rife, or it was a guy who invented the Rife machine. But they did a video of this where they took a petri dish of cancer cells, and he had one of those frequency sound generator things where, like where they turn it up and it's like, woo, you hear it ramping up. And he goes, watch, when I get to frequency whatever, watch what happens to the cancer cells. So you're looking at these cancer cells through the magnifying glass or the microscope. You're seeing the water kind of, do different things as he raises the temperature or raises the frequency. And he's like, when I get to frequency whatever, watch what happens to the cells. And these are actual living cancer cells in this dish. And he gets up to a certain frequency, and they just start bursting. And he was like, you can send these frequencies into living tissue, and it will only, at this frequency, he said, it will only impact the cancer cells. So if somebody has like a tumor on their liver, won't affect the liver tissue, the skin tissue, the muscle, the fat. It will, and this was a long time ago. Like, this was not a new video. This is an old video.
So if that actually worked, why do we not know about it?
I think the federal government owns the patent on that.
Oh, I sent you guys a bunch of patent links.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, that's a conspiracy. Patent. That's a conspiracy. Patent. I sent you guys like 5 patents.
Like the carburetor that gets 50 miles to the gallon.
Yeah.
That's on a shelf somewhere.
Well, yeah, you got to figure there is a lot of power and control and money in sickness. How many people have there been that have come up missing? There's been planes go down, of scientists and doctors going to conventions who claim to have found the cure to cancer, and so I think I think there's probably multiple cures, and I think that they are absolutely known, but cancer is big business, man. Death is big business. Sickness is big business, and I think that a lot of the drugs that come out, they are masking problems. They're not, very few of them are actually healing anyone of anything. They're treatment.
If you'd have said that 5 years ago, that would have been a conspiracy theory for sure. But now we know for sure sickness is big business. We know that for sure, without a doubt.
Isn't that funny, though? Isn't that funny how that changes so quick, and how half the things we were talking about right now, I'd probably be put in a loony bin just for even mentioning them. But now it's like, if not at least entertainable, I think, for a lot of people. We're almost running out of conspiracy theories to even talk about. So many have come true.
Yeah, I mean, they want to deny that we have an obesity problem, or they want to deny a lot of these diseases, and it's like, well, I can that one's hard to really get past me because I can.
There's a drug for that now.
Yeah, there's a drug. That's right.
Yeah.
There's a drug for that.
No, sickness is big business.
It is
man.
big
And-
business. That's
And one of the things that really speaks to that too is the way they handled COVID within the hospitals. The fact that they wouldn't let people have treatments, the fact that they denied them, the fact that you didn't have the right as a citizen to say, I've heard that these treatments that have been around forever, that are highly tolerable, highly forgiving to the human body, almost no risk whatsoever in me taking them. I've heard about these. A lot of doctors are talking about them. I'd like to try that first. The fact that you couldn't just tell a doctor that and do it, nope. We need to intubate you and give you remdesivir, which had a 50% death rate when we piloted it in Africa. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
That's our.
And it turns out the intubation was killing most people.
Yeah. Yep. The intubation, and the remdesivir. But the fact that you couldn't do things, couldn't try treatments that posed absolutely no risk to you whatsoever, you couldn't even try it first, is so crazy to me. You had to take their protocol, which was not working.
Well, my mom's going through this right now. She's got cancer, and none of the treatments, she's tried the immunotherapy, none of that stuff's working. So they finally go, okay, well, really the only thing left is you can be part of this study group. She goes, okay, well, so they give her this is massive document. Hey, read this. So she sends it to everybody in the family. Hey, read this. Let me make sure I'm making the right decision here. So it's part of this control group right now that has a 10% success rate. Huh. You have to take this. It's basically it's a chemo pill, and they know that stem cell treatment will work, but in order to get that far, she has to go 9 months of chemo pills. Meanwhile, her cancer is just spreading.
Yeah.
She had one lesion in her brain. Now she's got two. She's got spots on her lungs. It's spreading, and they're like, well, here's 9 months of this chemo pill. It may or may not work. It's got a 10% chance right now. Oh, also, oddly enough, some of the side effects, you have to watch out. You could get HIV, you could get hepatitis. And she goes, wait, just from taking this medicine? He goes, well, So, no, I don't know. How about, hold on a second. Just to get to the stem cell therapy, which they know works. But no, you can't just, well, why don't we just bypass that? I just do the stem cell stuff. I'll pay for it. Nah, you got to do this first. Oh,
that sucks,
okay.
dude.
So,
Dude, I'm sorry to hear that. That sucks. You know what you should do a little bit of research on is SEACT. Look into that. I won't get super into that, but look up SEACT and read what people are saying about it, what they're saying it's done for them. And then the Rife machines that do that frequency stuff, those are the only way I know to get like a legitimate one. They're pretty pricey. They're pretty expensive, but maybe there's probably some small investments you could do for some of that are to get a version of it that may or may not be helpful. But look into the SEACT. That's what I would.
well,
If I was diagnosed tomorrow,
yeah.
I'd start. Yeah, it sucks. And it sucks. It sucks that taking advantage of us. And that's the thing. Like we hear from the politicians all the time. Well, I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to do that for you. But we all know at the end of the day, they don't give a dump about us. No. Yeah, they don't give a dump. So we got to ask the hard questions. We got to experiment. We got to theorize. We got to figure it out for ourselves. And we got to do things like this. We have to have these discussions. Mm-hmm. We got to talk. And if anybody sees this and watches this and that sparks a conversation for them with someone else and maybe they learn something and that person learns something, I think that dialogue is so critical and so important to all of our lives, and we have to be doing it. Even if we get it wrong, even if we get it wrong, we have to be doing it.
Yeah. Well, I think we're out of time.
Yeah, I got to poop.
The truth is out there.
You got to go on your floor?
There's a haircut in that seat. Just go.
No, I'll probably leave it here for you guys.